A black nurse refuses to deliver a pregnant woman. What happens next is terrifying. The deserted lobby of Hospital de la Croix-Rousse was bathed in the harsh fluorescent light. The acrid smell of disinfectant mingled with a heavy silence, broken only by the distant hum of machines. Suddenly, the sliding doors hissed open, swallowing a staggering figure. "Help!" The cry, hoarse and laden with panic, tore through the atmosphere. Isabelle de la Roche, dressed in a torn and soaked silk evening gown, her disheveled hair stuck to her face, smeared with tears and mascara, collapsed heavily onto the cold linoleum. "My baby, it's coming now." Her hand, with its perfect red nails, clawed at the floor. The cushion-cut diamond ring she wore sparkled, grotesque, under the neon lights. Behind the reception desk, Madame Perrin, the pale-faced night receptionist, jumped violently, knocking over her cup of cold tea. "My God!" She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling so hard she missed the keys. "Code white. Main lobby. Absolute emergency. I repeat, absolute emergency." Her piercing voice echoed through the intercom, sending a shockwave through the sleeping hospital. The nocturnal calm shattered. Hurried footsteps screeched. Two orderlies, Leo and Samir, emerged from a side corridor, pushing an empty gurney. Almost simultaneously, Chloe, a red-haired nurse with a freckled face and a volcanic temper, came running from the other side, followed closely by Antoine, a young internal medicine intern, still looking sleepy. "Holy shit, she's in labor," Chloe exclaimed, rushing towards Isabelle. She placed a hand on the young woman's taut belly. "Monster contraction. Where's the OB team?" Leo bent down to try to lift Isabelle by the armpits. "Come on, man, we're going—" "No!" Isabelle screamed, her body suddenly arching under a new wave of pain. Her nails, like claws, dug deep into Leo's forearm. "Ouch! Damn it!" he let out, recoiling, a bloody scratch on his skin. "Let her go," Chloe ordered with authority. "She's in transition. Don't move her." Antoine, sterile drapes, the OB emergency kit, quick. The intern, frozen for a moment, nodded and ran off. "It's too late. I can feel it. It's coming out." Isabelle moaned, her eyes wide with animalistic terror, staring at a point on the ceiling. Her breathing was a ragged pant. It was then that Aminata Cisse appeared at the end of the main corridor. The night charge nurse. She advanced with a measured, unfailing step, her immaculate white uniform a stark contrast to the surrounding panic. Her dark brown gaze, behind her thin glasses, swept over the scene with clinical speed. Isabelle on the floor, arched in pain, the frantic team, Leo wiping his arm. "Murd, Aminata, finally!" Chloe exclaimed, looking up, her face flushed with effort and adrenaline. "She's in active labor, fully dilated. The baby's crowning, I can feel it. We have to get her up to her 4 now. Where the hell is Fournier?" Aminata approached without hurrying. Her eyes registered the vital details. The extreme pallor under Isabelle's ruined makeup, the baby's position guessed from the shape of her belly, the frequency and intensity of the contractions read in the tension of the young woman's body. Then her gaze fell on Isabelle's face, streaming with sweat and black tears. For a fraction of a second, a tiny flicker of emotion crossed Aminata's impassive features. She froze, exactly 2 meters away. Madame Perrin, leaning over her counter, her face a wreck, turned to her as if to a savior. "Aminata, thank God. She says she can feel the head. The night OB team isn't answering. You have to do something." Aminata raised a dry hand, palm forward, a brusque gesture that cut off the flow of words and brought a sudden silence. Her voice, usually calm, had become a metallic instrument, without inflection, chilling the already tense atmosphere. "This is not my department. The obstetrics department is on the 4th floor. Call the designated on-call team. Immediately." Protocol. A silence of total stupefaction fell upon the lobby. Even Isabelle's moans seemed to die down for a moment. Chloe stared at her, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if she no longer recognized her colleague. Are you kidding me, Aminata?" Her voice rose, thick with fury. Look at her, for God's sake. The baby is going to be born here. Now, on this fucking floor. Does the Hippocratic Oath mean anything to you? Or did you leave your humanity in the locker room tonight? Isabel looked up at Aminata with a heart-wrenching gaze, a mixture of excruciating pain, primal terror, and desperate supplication. Please, I'm begging you, help me, he's gonna die. Her voice was now just a hoarse whisper. Aminata did not look at Chloe. Her dark eyes remained fixed on Isabel, but seemed to see beyond her, through her, lost in some dizzying internal calculation. Her jaw clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched under her right cheekbone. Every second weighed a ton. No, she repeated, the word falling like a concrete slab. I'm not certified for primary obstetrical care. Protocol. She took a deliberate, slow step back, then another. Her gaze met Isabel's one last time, conveying a silent message of unbearable intensity, a shared pain, a warning, an implacable resolution. Hold on. Aminata, don't do this. Chloe screamed, her voice broken by a mixture of rage and horror. But Aminata had already pivoted on her heels, her back straight as a blade, and was walking away with a steady, relentless pace, disappearing into the shadows of the long corridor leading to her internal medicine unit. Chaos erupted anew in the lobby. Isabel's piercing screams resumed, louder, more desperate. It's coming out. It's coming out. Help me. Shit, shit, shit. Chloe swore, dropping to her knees beside Isabel. Leo, Samir, support her. Perrin, call OB again. Get anyone you can up here. Antoine, where's that damn kit? At that exact moment, the elevator doors opened with an incongruous ding. Dr. Fournier, the head of the obstetrics on-call team, looking still half asleep, his lab coat improperly buttoned, emerged yawning, followed by two nurses, including a tall blonde with cold eyes, Sophie Dubois, who cast a quick, strangely calm glance at the scene. Fournier. Finally, Chloe bellowed. Complete dilation, cephalopresentation. It's coming out right here, right now. Fournier, seeing Isabel on the floor, her legs held up by Leo, and Samir paled slightly. Good God. Good God. Sophie, the emergency kit. Quick. Sophie knelt with cold efficiency, unfolding a sterile drape that she slid under Isabel. Her gloved hands were quick and precise, but her gaze, when it briefly met the terrified Isabel's, was cruelly lacking in warmth. Push, madam, she said in a neutral voice. Now. A few seconds later, with a final, heart-rending scream from Isabel, the lusty cries of a newborn filled the silent lobby, echoing strangely in the deserted space. Chloe, her face streaming with sweat, lifted the slick baby and placed him on his exhausted mother's stomach. Mathis Leroy, 22, with dark circles under his eyes, was nervously fidgeting with his phone while waiting for news of his father, who was undergoing emergency surgery for appendicitis. The piercing scream had made him jump. Fascinated and horrified, he had discreetly taken out his smartphone and filmed the most intense 58 seconds. The collapse, the panic, the arrival of the stone-faced nurse, her chilling refusal, her implacable departure, and finally, the birth on the cold floor. Without thinking, driven by indignation, he posted the video on Twitter with a title in red capital letters that he found impactful. Scandal at LA Croix-Rousse. Nurse lets a rich woman give birth on the floor. Hashtag honte à la Croix-Rousse, hashtag infirmière de l'horreur. At 3:17 a.m., the shaky, poorly framed but terribly telling video began its infernal journey. Dr. Martin, the director of Hospital de la Croix-Rousse, paced his lavish office. His bald head gleamed with sweat under the neon lights. The phone on his desk shrieked incessantly, relayed by his secretaries, who was under siege in the antechamber. His computer screens looped the viral video, zooming in on Aminata's impassive face as she uttered protocol. Hashtag Hani la Croix-Rousse and hashtag Infirmi Rettelhor dominated national trends. The comments poured in, a black tide of hatred and summary judgments. Heartless monster. Strike her off and life in prison. Look at that icy face, no empathy with a name like Cisse. No wonder they're all incompetent in that death trap. Sitting opposite him, as stiff as a board on a too-hard chair, Aminata bore the marks of a sleepless night. Purple circles hollowed out her eyes, but her gaze remained fixed, impenetrable. She had been summoned at 6 a.m. For the love of God, Aminata, explain this to me. Martin implored, stopping short in front of her, on the verge of apoplexy. The nursing board has been notified. They're talking about striking you off. The lawyers, her husband's lawyers. His voice broke on the name. Victor de la Roche. Do you know who that is? His sharks from Bernard and Roussel, the most feared law firm in Lyon, have just sent a formal notice to the chairman of the board of directors. They're not just talking about criminal negligence, Aminata. They're talking about deliberate endangerment of life in a context of extreme vulnerability. They're preparing a damages lawsuit that could cost us tens of millions. They want your head, Aminata, on a silver platter. And to save our skins, to save this hospital, I'm going to have to give it to them. The name of Victor de la Roche, a real estate mogul with brutal methods and a sprawling network of influence, hung in the air like a palpable threat. Aminata looked up at him with a tired but unshakably firm gaze. I strictly followed the established protocol, Dr. Martin. I'm not an obstetrician. My field is internal medicine. The dedicated team, although delayed, intervened in a timely manner. The mother and child are out of danger, transferred to the postpartum unit. That is what is essential. Out of danger? Martin exploded, slamming his fist on his mahogany desk. Giving birth on the floor of a hospital lobby. Is that your definition of out of danger? You know, basic neonatal resuscitation skills. Any healthcare provider does. Why? Why this sudden bureaucratic zeal? What is your decision, Dr. Martin? She asked calmly, bringing the conversation back to its inevitable conclusion. Martin looked away, unable to meet her gaze. He no longer saw his most competent, most decorated charge nurse, but the face of the scandal, the epicenter of the disaster. He nervously fiddled with a silver pen. We have no choice. The media pressure, the hospital's reputation, already fragile, the threats of lawsuits, the very survival of the institution. He took a deep, painful breath. You are suspended on a precautionary basis, effective immediately, pending the conclusions of the internal investigation and the disciplinary decisions of the nursing board and the medical establishment committee. Hand over your badge and your set of keys. Immediately, without a word, without a sign of protest or anger, Aminata slowly unclipped the white plastic badge from her uniform. Sis Aminata, nurse coordinator. She placed it gently on the gleaming desk, next to the set of silver keys that opened the doors to her department, her files, her nocturnal kingdom. She stood up. At the door, she turned back one last time, her hand on the cold handle. It wasn't a mistake, Dr. Martin, she said, her voice low but clear. It was a necessity. Then she walked out, silently closing the door behind her, leaving Martin alone with the abandoned badge that seemed to accuse him. Aminata's modest apartment, in a clean but soulless social housing complex, had become a besieged fortress. From 7 a.m., journalists and cameramen had gathered in front of the entrance. Curious neighbors watched from their windows. Aminata, who had arrived by taxi through a service entrance, had drawn all the curtains. The landline rang nonstop. Her mobile phone, placed on the kitchen table, vibrated and blinked relentlessly, flooded with notifications. Hundreds of hateful Twitter messages, abusive Facebook comments, death threats via email, calls from blocked numbers. She picked it up, turned it off, and threw it in a drawer that she locked, as if to contain the storm. A press release, written with vitriol by the law firm Bernard and Roussel on behalf of Victor de la Roche, was distributed to all agencies. The de la Roche family expresses its horror and indignation at the barbaric and dehumanizing ordeal suffered by Mrs. Isabelle de la Roche at Hôpital de la Croix-Rousse. Broken physically and psychologically by the inhumanity and bureaucratic coldness of an employee who has dishonored her profession and the public service as a whole. Mrs. de la Roche and her newborn are under constant medical and psychiatric supervision. We will immediately initiate all legal proceedings against those responsible for this unspeakable trauma, from the top of the hierarchy down to the perpetrator whose behavior constitutes the most abject negligence. The truth will be brought to light and justice will be served. The vindictiveness, now officially fueled by a rich and powerful source, reached a fever pitch. The 1 p.m. news editorialists replayed the video on a loop, analyzing Aminata's soulless face, speaking of serious ethical misconduct, perversion of the system, dehumanization of medicine. A medical ethics expert, paid by the minute, even spoke of a perverted God complex. In the late afternoon, starving and suffocating, Aminata resigned herself to going out, buried under a hoodie and large sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She headed for the corner bakery. As she crossed the lobby of her building, she ran into Madame Leroy, her next-door neighbor, a widowed retiree whose groceries she often carried up and whose rheumatism she treated. The old woman recognized her despite the disguise. Her face froze, then flushed violently, a wave of obvious fear and disgust passing through her eyes. She opened her mouth as if to say hello, but no sound came out. Without a word, she turned her head away with a sharp movement and hurried off, as if she had just encountered the plague. The building door slammed behind her with a violence that echoed in the empty lobby and struck Aminata right in the heart, more painfully than a blow. She stood frozen for a moment, breathless before going out, her back bent under the weight of rejection. Back in her apartment with the curtains drawn, she sat in the dark, alone in a now hostile silence, populated by the echoes of hateful cries. She shivered. She had chosen this path. She had prepared for it mentally. But the reality of the darkness, the absolute loneliness, and the deafening noise of the vindictiveness was more overwhelming than anything she could have imagined. She had lived through horrors, but she had never been the horror. Eleanor Vidal waited nervously in a discreet café in Vieux Lion, Le Comptoir de Canets, a timeless place with dark woodwork. An independent journalist known for her integrity and her stubbornness in tracking down the truth behind appearances. The Cisse case haunted her. The hatred was too unanimous, too perfect, the narrative too black and white. Snippets of testimony gleaned from Aminata's former colleagues or patients she had treated spoke of a woman devoted to the point of exhaustion, of inflexible moral rigor, of a discreet but profound humanity. The image of the coal monster didn't fit. She had contacted Aminata through a discreet channel, hoping for a meeting. The suspended nurse entered, furtive like a shadow. A large dark coat floated around her emaciated figure, dark glasses hiding her gaze. She sat opposite Eleanor, her back to the wall, sweeping the room with a quick glance like a cornered animal before taking off her glasses. Eleanor held her breath. The face she discovered was that of a martyr. Deep, purplish circles hollowed out her bloodshot eyes. Her features were drawn, her skin dull, but the shock came from her gaze. A raw, animal suffering fought fiercely against a determination that still burned, like embers under the ashes. Nothing, absolutely nothing, of the cold insensitivity described by the media. I didn't let her suffer out of cruelty, Eleanor, Aminata said in a hoarse, worn voice, as if from a long silence. I did it to save her. She gently placed a small object on the wooden table, a black, ordinary USB stick, which nevertheless seemed to radiate a dark energy. To save her from her husband. A cold shiver ran down Eleanor's spine. She felt she was touching the burning core. Aminata took a small laptop out of her bag. Her hands trembled slightly. She inserted the USB stick, clicked, and launched a video file. The image was shaky, grainy, filmed in secret, probably from a pocket or behind an object. But the sound was chillingly clear. Do you understand, Isabel? A man's voice, low, hoarse, charged with a dull, control violence. You don't talk to anyone. Not to your superficial bridge friends, not to your whiny sister, and especially not to a doctor, a cop, or any self-proclaimed savior. You give birth when I decide where I decide. And if you take one step out of line, if you try any funny business. A heavy, menacing silence. I swear on everything I hold dear that neither you nor that little piece of flesh you're carrying will ever see the light of day again. Is that perfectly clear? A clenched fist, large, adorned with a massive gold signet ring, appeared in the frame and suddenly struck Isabel's shoulder, off camera, with brutal, casual force. A muffled cry of pure terror, followed by the sound of a fall against wood. "Answer me when I talk to you, Isabel," the voice growled, full of cruel impatience. "Yes, yes, Victor. It's clear," sobbed the woman's voice, broken, crushed. The video stopped. The silence in the cafe was suddenly deafening, broken only by the distant hiss of the espresso machine. Eleanor was livid, nausea rising in her throat. She had covered violence before, but this cold, calculated, inflicted on a pregnant woman had a particularly vile dimension. 3 weeks ago, Aminata resumed, her voice a little firmer now, as if the revelation of this shared secret was freeing her from a crushing weight. "Isabel came to see me. Right here." She was terrified, on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She had discovered things, monstrous things. Victor, in addition to his legal real estate business that serves as a front, actually runs a vast network. Drug trafficking, large-scale money laundering, high-end prostitution, and worse. Aminata lowered her voice even more. To cover his tracks, to clean up his problems, he has accomplices. Within La Croix-Rousse itself, on the night obstetrics team, a nurse, Sophie Dubois, and an orderly, probably Samir, whom he pays handsomely. They are in his pocket. Eleanor listened, petrified, her pen motionless on her moleskine notebook. The plan for Isabel was simple and atrocious, Aminata continued, the words seeming to cost her. To make her disappear during childbirth. A sudden, uncontrollable postpartum hemorrhage, declared too late. A medical tragedy. No one would have dug deeper. And the newborn would disappear, probably to be used as a bargaining chip or collateral in his most sordid dealings with certain unsavory partners. "My God," Eleanor whispered, horrified. Isabel was trapped, watched 24/7 by her driver, a gorilla who was actually her bodyguard and jailer. Escaping was impossible. He would have found and killed her before she even reached the border. Aminata stared at Eleanor intensely. That night, in the lobby, when I saw her on the floor, I recognized Sophie Dubois among the team rushing toward her. The very one Isabel was most wary of, whom she had seen talking at length and suspiciously with Victor. If I had intervened, if I had laid hands on her to save her at that moment, I would have just followed the protocol, and they would have legally taken over once in the obstetrics department, in a delivery room they controlled. She was lost. My one and only choice was to create chaos, a public, immediate, brutal, resounding scandal. To force a delay, to draw the eyes of the entire hospital, and soon the entire country, to this woman giving birth on the floor in the lobby. To make the transfer impossible to manipulate discreetly, so that the day team, the real one, the one that wasn't compromised, would end up taking over in the general confusion and under the eyes of forced witnesses. So that Isabel and her baby would be visible, therefore untouchable. Aminata's voice finally broke, not over her own suffering, but over the suffering she had had to inflict. A single, solitary, burning tear ran down her hollow cheek, and she wiped it away with an angry gesture, as if punishing herself for this weakness. I knew what it would cost me. My career, my reputation, my name, my peace. But it was her only chance to live, and that of her baby. I had to become a monster, so that she would not become the victim. A long silence fell. Eleanor breathed deeply, trying to digest the enormity of the revelation. "The USB stick?" she finally asked, her voice strained, pointing to the black object on the table. "Everything is on it," Aminata confirmed, pushing the stick slightly towards the journalist. Audio recordings that Isabel secretly made with a second phone. Copies of financial documents, offshore transactions that she managed to copy from Victor's computer. Names, meeting places, account numbers in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands. Enough evidence to destroy him and his entire network. She entrusted it to me during our last meeting, telling me, if something happens to me, if I don't survive, use this. Burn him, but save my child. Eleanor took the USB stick. She felt its physical weight, but especially its crushing moral weight. Lives, secrets, hopes, dangers. She looked Aminata straight in the eye. The journalist and the nurse. Two women separated by everything, but united by the same quest for truth and justice. We're going to burn him, Aminata, Eleanor said with a cold determination. We're going to burn him together, to the ground. Eleanor Vidal stared at her computer screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard like a general before battle. The black USB stick was plugged in, its files open in separate windows. Transcripts of the chilling audio recordings, scans of opaque financial documents, lists of names and numbers. The smell of the strong coffee she had just made filled her small, cluttered office. Her editor-in-chief, Jean-Pierre Moreau, a bearded man in his 50s with a piercing gaze, was pacing behind her. Are you sure about this, Eleanor? He asked for the third time, stopping short. De La Roche. He's not just anyone. His lawyers will demolish us. And this evidence, does it hold up legally? The source is reliable. Jean-Pierre, Eleanor cut in, without taking her eyes off the screen. More than reliable. She risked everything, and the evidence speaks for itself. Listen to this. She played a short audio clip. Victor's voice, menacing and contemptuous. That little piece of flesh you're carrying will never see the light of day again. Is that perfectly clear? Followed by the dull thud and Isabel's sob. Jean-Pierre Moreau paled slightly. Damn, that's direct. But we're not releasing everything. The trafficking, the accomplices at the hospital? Not yet, Eleanor decided, clicking to select the most impactful and irrefutable elements. Too risky. We'll release the essentials. The systemic domestic violence, the explicit threat to the child, Aminata's unbearable moral dilemma, and casting doubt on the smear campaign orchestrated by De La Roche. We'll release the audio clip as tangible proof. That will force an investigation. The rest will follow. The headline, The De La Roche Affair. What if the Croix-Rousse nurse wasn't the monster? Another story of violence and sacrifice. Jean-Pierre nodded slowly, a glint of admiration in his eyes. It's doable. But get ready, Eleanor. The storm is going to be biblical. The article was published at 6:03 p.m. on L'Enquête Lyonnaise, an independent platform known for its tenacity. It didn't reveal the entire criminal network, but it described with surgical precision Victor's hold over Isabel, the terror in which she lived, her partial discovery of his illegal activities, and her absolute despair. It explained Aminata's heart-wrenching choice to create a public scandal to make Isabel and her baby visible, and therefore untouchable by the corrupt night team, forcing the intervention of the uncompromised day team. It quoted anonymous testimonies from colleagues praising Aminata's past professionalism and humanity. And most importantly, it was accompanied by the terrifying audio clip. The effect was staggering. As Jean-Pierre had predicted, a storm arose, but a different one. First, a stunned silence on social media. Then, the hashtag Justice for Aminata emerged timidly, shared by internet users shocked by the audio. Voices were raised, that voice. It's monstrous. She sacrificed her life to save two. We've been lied to. The major news outlets, caught off guard, hesitated. Some, more cautious, ran headlines like, New Twist in the Cisse Affair. Damning recordings of Victor De La Roche emerge. Others, who had led the charge against Aminata, published embarrassed articles, downplaying their role, speaking of new complexity, under pressure from their legal departments, which were panicked by the threats from Bernard and Roussel. At Victor De La Roche's, the fury was apocalyptic. In his office with its precious wood-paneled walls, he swept a heavy crystal ashtray off his desk with a violent backhand, and it shattered against the wall. That bitch of a journalist, he screamed, his face scarlet, at his two senior lawyers, Maitre Bernard and Maitre Roussel, who were pale. "I want her head. And that whore of a nurse's. Do something." Maitre Bernard, the elder, spoke, his voice tense. "Victor, calm down. The audio is delicate, very delicate. We can't deny it outright. Our strategy, attack the source. Say it's a fake, fabricated by this sensationalist journalist and the vengeful nurse. File a lawsuit for defamation, slander, invasion of privacy. Strike hard and fast. Do it," Victor roared. "And find me that bitch Isabel and the kid. Now." The audio clip, of a sound authenticity difficult to dispute, and the serious accusations made by Eleanor, had the effect Aminata had hoped for. Alerted by magistrates who had read the article, the Lyon Public Prosecutor's Office opened a preliminary investigation that same evening for domestic violence with a weapon, repeated death threats, and suspicion of criminal conspiracy for the purpose of, based on the allegations concerning the criminal network. A stern and experienced investigating judge, Julian Mercier, was appointed. The USB stick deposited anonymously in the mailbox of the Paletta Justice by Eleanor herself, with a printed copy of her article, was recovered by a bailiff and immediately entrusted to the investigators of the Financial Crimes Brigade and the Anti-Gang Brigade, BRB. While Victor de la Roche and his lawyers desperately tried to stifle the affair by suing Eleanor and Ling Keat-Lynes for defamation, the investigators worked around the clock. Isabel's recordings were frighteningly clear. In addition to the threats, there were phone conversations in which Victor mentioned special deliveries, necessary cleanups, names of boats, and numbered accounts. The financial documents, though complex, traced suspicious money flows to tax havens, with colossal amounts. And one name came up often in connection with La Croix-Rousse, Sophie Dubois. The nurse was placed under discreet surveillance. It led the police to a brief but intense meeting in an underground parking garage with Samir, the orderly present on the night of the birth, in the lobby. Photos were taken. Their phones were tapped. The encrypted but nervous conversations that followed confirmed their shady connections to de la Roche. Most importantly, the BRB located Isabel. Thanks to a detail heard in a recording, and by cross-referencing discrete properties linked to de la Roche's frontmen, they identified an isolated chalet in the Verkers Massif. A discreet observation team confirmed the presence of a woman matching her description and a newborn, protected not by de la Roche's guards, but by a couple of seemingly unsuspecting caretakers. The operation was carried out with military speed and synchronization. At dawn, while a cold fog still enveloped the valleys, several unmarked raid vehicles positioned themselves near the isolated chalet. Capitaine Lefebvre, the operation commander, coordinated the teams by radio. Alpha Team in position north. Bravo Team west. Charlie Team, cover the south exit. We're going in soft. Absolute priority, the mother and child. Secondary objective, the caretakers, alive if possible. The assault was lightning fast. The front and back doors gave way simultaneously under the power of silent hydraulic rams. "Police! Don't move!" The shouts echoed through the still sleeping chalet. In less than 30 seconds, the two caretakers, surprised in their beds, were handcuffed without resistance. On the second floor, a terrified Isabel clutched her baby to her chest in a bedroom, believing it was an attack by Victor's men. It was a female raid officer, a young woman with a reassuring face, who entered first, her weapon lowered. "Mrs. de la Roche? Police. You are safe. No one will harm you anymore. Your daughter is safe." Upon seeing the uniform, upon hearing those words, Isabel burst into tears, a mixture of terror and unspeakable hope. She held out the baby wrapped in a pink blanket. "Celeste. Her name is Celeste." Simultaneously, in Lyon, other raid and BRB teams stormed Victor de la Roche's lavish mansion, his ultra-modern offices near Place Belcourt, and Sophie Dubois's apartment. The images that made the rounds on the midday news were striking. Victor de la Roche, in a wrinkled silk pajama set, handcuffed and flanked by two police officers in combat fatigues and caps, his face contorted with impotent and incredulous rage, being pushed head down into an armored van. Sophie Dubois, screaming insults and struggling, was forcibly restrained in front of her building. Samir, for his part, was arrested as he was starting his shift at Hôpital de la Croix-Rousse under the stunned gazes of the staff. Victor de la Roche's empire of fear and corruption was collapsing live on air. Aminata did not watch the images of the arrest live. She was already at Hôpital de la Croix-Rousse, summoned by a visibly uncomfortable Dr. Martin. In his office, the atmosphere was tense, imbued with a palpable awkwardness. "Mrs. Cisse, Aminata," Martin began, avoiding her gaze, fiddling with his pen. The internal investigation, of course, is closed. The conclusions of the nursing board are pending, but given the developments..." He took a deep breath. "The management, the board of directors, we offer you our most sincere apologies for the suspension and for the rush to judgment against you in this matter. Your reinstatement is immediate and full. Your duties as night nurse coordinator await you." Aminata simply nodded. No triumph, no visible bitterness on her tired but peaceful face. "Thank you, Dr. Martin." Her voice was calm, professional. "The media, they will probably want to talk to you," Martin added awkwardly. "A statement is planned." "I have nothing to add to the facts," Aminata cut in gently. "My work is here." She stood up. Martin, visibly relieved that she was not demanding more apologies or public recognition, handed her a new badge. She took it, staring at it for a moment. Sis Aminata, Nurse Coordinator. Same title. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. As she left the office, as she walked down a corridor that seemed less familiar than it appeared, a young nurse she didn't know, with short hair and a shy gaze, approached her nervously. "Mrs. Cisse?" Aminata stopped. The young woman held out a simple white envelope with no return address. "For you. They gave it to me at reception this morning." The handwriting on the envelope was fine, elegant, but traced with a still trembling hand. Aminata nodded her thanks and waited until she was alone in a quiet corner near a window to open it. The day was breaking, flooding the linoleum with a golden light. She unfolded the sheet of paper. "Dear Aminata, how can I find the words? Thank you is a whisper lost in the ocean of what I owe you. It is ridiculously small, too weak to contain the immense gratitude and guilt that overwhelm me. You protected me when I was all alone in the world, lost in a nightmare from which I saw no way out. You saw the horror hidden behind the diamonds, the dresses, and the forced smiles at Gallus. You made a choice that no soul should ever have to make. You accepted being hated, hunted, publicly broken, so that I might have a chance, so that my little girl could be born free. You carried the hatred of the entire world on your shoulders, endured the insults, the threats, the rejection, so that I could simply breathe, so that Celeste could take her first breath in a world finally rid of his shadow. She was born 3 days ago, in a safe place, far from everything, surrounded by peaceful silence and benevolent hands that watch over us. She weighs 3.4 kilos. She has long, thin fingers like a pianist and soft, black hair like velvet, like yours. She has my eyes, I think a deep blue. But what I wish for above all else, with all the strength of my bruised but healing heart, is that she will one day inherit your courage, your silent strength, that incredible ability to do what is right, no matter the personal cost. I named her Celeste, for the light you gave us, Aminata, the light of hope, of freedom, of life. By plunging yourself into the deepest darkness, by agreeing to become the monster so that we could be the survivors, you gave us this light. Celeste owes you her life, and I owe you my rediscovered freedom. A freedom that today has the salty taste of the tears I shed as I write these words. Tears of shame for having been, however unwillingly, the instrument of your unspeakable suffering, and tears of a gratitude so infinite, so overwhelming, that it floods me and leaves me speechless. One day, when this shadow is definitively dispelled, when justice has run its course, I hope with all my being to be able to hold you in my arms, To introduce you to Celeste, this little flame that you saved, and to tell you to your face, looking you in the eye, everything that this poor piece of paper can never adequately express. The depth of my gratitude, the immensity of my debt, and the eternal place you now hold in our lives. You are my hero, Aminata, the dark angel who held out her hand to me at the edge of the abyss, the one who refused to let me fall. With all my heart, forever. Aminata read the letter. Then a second time, more slowly. Her fingers tightened on the edges of the paper until it crinkled. She looked up at the window. The rising sun now flooded the corridor, chasing away the last shadows of the night. No tears fell. That would be for later, in the silence of her apartment. But a deep, liberating, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her from head to toe. An immense weight, that of the world's hatred, of crushing loneliness, of the sacrifice made, was finally, slowly, beginning to dissipate. It was being replaced by the fragile, precious, radiant warmth of the words written on that paper. A warmth that rose from the letter and nestled against her heart. She carefully folded the paper like an infinitely precious treasure and slipped it into the inside pocket of her uniform jacket, just above her beating heart. She headed for the staff locker room. Her locker was waiting for her. Inside, her uniform, freshly pressed by the hospital's laundry service, hung on a hanger. White, immaculate, like a new page. She put on slowly, feeling the familiar, slightly rough fabric against her skin. It was like putting on a rediscovered second skin, an armor of professionalism and vocation. She buttoned each button with ceremonial slowness, a silent ritual of reclaiming her identity, her life. And she put the lanyard of the new badge around her neck. The small, cool plastic rectangle tapped gently against her chest, near the letter. A reminder and a promise. She pushed open the locker room door and entered the main corridor of her wing, bathed in the golden morning light. Immediately, she became the center of palpable attention. Nurses stopping short in their tracks, orderlies frozen with their carts, doctors looking up from their files. She was a ghost returned from the media dead. The looks were a complex mixture. Respect, yes, but also a deep retrospective guilt, a persistent misunderstanding, an intense curiosity. Some looked down, blushing, remembering their own hasty judgments, their complicit silences. Others gave her a shy, almost fearful nod. Chloe, the fiery redhead, was just coming out of room 206. Upon seeing Aminata, she stopped short, her usually expressive face closed off by emotion. She approached, wringing her hands, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Aminata, she began, her voice choked. I don't know what to say. What I yelled that night. What I thought. What everyone thought. She shook her head, unable to find the words. We didn't know. We couldn't have known. I'm so sorry. Tears finally streamed down her freckled cheeks. Aminata stopped. She looked at Chloe, saw the raw sincerity of her remorse, the reflection of the collective guilt that weighed on the department. She didn't smile, but her gaze became less distant. She gently, firmly, placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance, of acceptance. It's nothing, Chloe, she said, her voice regaining a softness that was thought to be lost. No one could have known. It's over now. She removed her hand. Let's get back to work. There are patients who need us. She resumed her walk towards the nursing station. The gazes followed her, still charged with emotion, but now also with a renewed respect, mingled with a question. How had she done it? How had she held on? They were only just beginning, confusedly, to glimpse the terrible and magnificent truth. Sometimes, the one who is condemned most violently, the one who is nailed to the media pillory, the one who is symbolically burned at the public stake, is precisely the one who, in the deepest shadow and at the cost of sacrificing everything dear to her, risked everything to do what was right, to save lives in silence and dignity. She stopped in front of room 214. The door was ajar. Inside, a young mother, Madame Petit, exhausted but radiant, was gently rocking her newborn. Aminata knocked softly on the doorframe before entering. "Good morning, Madame Petit," she said with a quiet smile, the first genuine, unforced, not pained smile she had worn in what felt like an eternity. "I'm Aminata, your nurse for this morning. How is our little Louis today? Did he sleep well last night?" Her voice was calm, professional, regaining the familiar, soothing warmth of care, of comfort, of attention to others. It was there, and only there, in that fragile and essential bond between caregiver and patient, that the true purpose of her vocation resided. She approached the transparent bassinet. The baby, Louis, was sleeping peacefully, his little fists clenched near his cherubic face. Aminata checked the heart and respiratory monitors with an expert, fluid gesture, a silent dance of her hands that knew every move. Then she leaned down slightly and brushed the tip of her index finger against the small pink hand, open like a fragile flower in his peaceful sleep. A tiny hand, full of promise. In the corridor, a respectful silence had fallen. No one spoke. No one judged anymore. They simply watched through the doorway, this simple yet so powerful scene. Aminata looked up, her gaze meeting Chloe's, Leo's, other colleagues. She gave him a faint smile, a silent absolution, a door open to the future. Then she turned back to the room's window, flooded by the rising sun that now gilded the entire city, a promise of a new day. Celeste. She thought of the name. Heavenly. It was a beautiful name, a name full of hope, of resilience, of life conquered over darkness. She had done what was necessary. The light, finally, was breaking through.